Welcome to America's Talking. I'm Art Kane, managing editor for investigations at the Center Square. And joining me is one of my reporters on the team, Southwest investigative reporter Johnny Edwards. As part of our fiscal fallout series, Johnny's been digging into the Louisiana state budget and found the full picture isn't as rosy as state leaders like to portray it. Johnny, what is the data that you dug into to tell us about Louisiana's budget?
Well, like you said, the picture is not as rosy. These numbers are going up, up, and up. I looked at a 10-year period, which comprises the entire tenure of former Democratic Governor John Bel Edwards, as well as the first 2 years of current Republican Governor Jeff Landry, and found that over that time span, there's been an increase in the total Louisiana budget of 71.5%. That is nearly or more than double the rate of inflation in that time period, which is roughly 34%. It's currently at $53.5 billion. That's a lot of money. And like I said, it continues to go up, both under a Democratic governor and a Republican governor. Landry had a little bit of a dip in his first year, but made up for it with a bigger increase in the second year.
So we all know that all the states got a lot of COVID money. COVID's been gone for probably 3 years. Why has the state total budget increased so much and continues to increase after COVID subsides?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. It's this infusion of federal funds. Louisiana gets an incredible amount of federal money. And that's been going on historically because there's so many natural disasters and other disasters that hit Louisiana. Think floods, hurricanes, Deepwater Horizon. And then also during his first year, former Governor Edwards signed an executive order, actually on his first day in office, expanding Medicaid. That really put the federal infusion of money into overdrive. And then, as you mentioned, COVID hit. And during Edwards' years, that was the biggest increase, obviously, was in the COVID years. The total budget went up about 15% during those years. And as with other states we've looked at in this series, the spending has not gone back down. In fact, since Edwards left office and Landry came into office, the budget's gone up another 5%.
So, when you have this big increase in base spending and then you continue to increase it from those levels, the pandemic increased in most states 10, 15, 20% over 2 years. And now they're increasing another 3 or 4 or 5% each year above that, but not going back to that base. What should taxpayers take away from that? Should they be concerned?
Well, absolutely, they should be concerned. And in Louisiana, they can look no further than the city of New Orleans, which is kind of having a microcosm of this problem right now. There's a massive deficit in that city. And part of the problem was that they took in a lot of federal money and it dried up, or there were some stalls in some payments, specifically some repair payments after hurricane damage. But it's when you lose that money and you're used to having the money, it makes everything in a deficit, or makes it where you've got people clamoring to get this money that they're so used to, and now you don't have it. When you look at the Louisiana state budget, practically every department and many of the line items have some sort of a federal contribution. So as some of the critics and watchdogs are alleging, that gets you used to having this. And particularly the climate in Washington right now with things like DOGE and people wanting Medicaid reform and SNAP benefits, things like that. There's a real threat that some of this federal money the spigot could get tightened.
And you tried to talk to the governor. He wouldn't talk to you. You did find someone to at least explain the side of the state. And this person claimed that the budgets really haven't increased other than for Medicaid, which ended up buying people health insurance, and that person thought that was a good thing. And then otherwise, it just kind of tracked with cost of living. Do you buy into that with your research, or do you think that's exaggerating the issue?
Well, I mean, that's his point of view. And of course, it's subjective. That's Jan Moeller. And he's been watching the budgets for a very long time. He's a former journalist, and he really knows his stuff. But he's talking about the general fund. And yes, the general fund, if you look at that only, it's currently at $12.2 billion, I believe. And that's actually increased in the last 10 years less than inflation. The increase over 10 years is about 27%. But again, they don't live on just the general fund alone. I mean, the total budget we looked at includes all three branches of government, infrastructure spending and the federal dollars. So you really have to look at all of it. And that was kind of Landry's pitch, or the message he gave out when he was talking about this current budget, was that we've got spending under control, we're getting it under control, and that's great. But as I said, every department, when you look at the budget, has some kind of a federal contribution, and so you really have to look at the big picture. Not to mention, by the way, I might add that Louisiana taxpayers may only care about the general fund because that's what Louisiana taxpayers pay into, but all of us pay into those federal pots. So we all ought to be concerned about a state spending this much more money even after a crisis like COVID is over with.
You're right about that. So the way these stories work is you kind of do an overall view of what happened in the state, and then you start to dig into things that are more detailed of what the agencies are spending it on. Is there any evidence that Louisiana is spending money on items it shouldn't?
Yes, that's also a subjective point of view, but there's lots of things in the budget that you could argue are wasteful or irresponsible or unaccountable. A big one is the surplus spending. Every year that tops $100 million, and it includes all kinds of line items that reek of pork projects. I mean, a lot of it's infrastructure, a lot of it's equipment for police, firefighters, parks, things like that. But it's also a lot of things going to nonprofits, NGOs, churches, and religious groups. I was very surprised to see so many religious groups getting infusions of public money. There's one of the watchdogs I spoke to, was questioning, has there been any audits or any looking into whether taxpayers are getting something for that money? Like, are these workforce programs creating jobs? Are these community projects benefiting the community? In fact, another thing too is that Governor Landry has started his own Doge-like program, the Fiscal Responsibility Program, and he's already found some things. He's found what appear to be unauthorized Medicaid payments in the range of $10 million. People that were dead people getting Medicaid payments. He's found some leases on some buildings that automatically renewed that might have been inefficient or just not a good deal. So there's lots of things that arguably could be trimmed or cut. And like I'm saying, if there was some kind of a crisis with the federal money, then you'd have to make some cuts really quick. And that was the kind of thing that hurt former Republican Governor Bobby Jindal when he was in office back in the days of the Great Recession. He had to make a lot of tough cuts, and people didn't like it.
Well, that's great work, Johnny. I'm sure you're going to keep digging into that state and some of the other states you cover. Thanks for joining me on America's Talking. And if you want to read Johnny's story, it's on thecentersquare.com.